Welcome, Styyx and Hammer, 666. Styyx, you're very welcome to Maloney's Digest. Hidden gem.
Thank you.
So, good to see you. Long-time viewer, first-time caller.
Yeah, it's great to be aboard here.
Yeah, how's the weather there in Holland?
Dutch. No sun, 40 degrees.
Yeah, that's. I remember seeing a meme about the American Fahrenheit, which had Frodo from Lord of the Rings in it, saying, "Okay, keep your secrets then." So about Fahrenheit. Yeah, here in Stockholm, it's -1 Celsius, blue skies, so it's pretty good. I'm recovering.
So you've got the sun, but not the warm air.
Exactly, yeah. But I'll take the sun. I'll take that. But yeah, I've been stuck in for the past 8 days because I caught the Rona, which has me absolutely wrecked of an evening. And then yeah, during the day it's fine, but I'm healed. I'm over it, and yeah, that all is good.
You took the therapeutics that shall not be named on a YouTube stream, maybe.
Yeah, well, I didn't because unfortunately you can't get your hands on them. But there was plenty of zinc, vitamin D. Yeah, I took a stroll into the woods and got some pine needles. So I made some pine needle tea. And just whatever I could get my hands on, paracetamol, aspirin.
The Dutch have a joke that their medical system is paracetamol.
Yeah, exactly. But they also have some other holistic remedies that might help to. We got Graham Russell in the chat. John Lennon, is it? So basically, my audience is a lovely touch of. Yeah, it's mostly comedy, and I'll discuss kind of. Basically, it's a low budget Russell Brand stream, but a bit more edgy. You could say I am somewhat of an edgelord.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, these days, edgy is anything that Fauci disagrees with these days. So it's it's low hanging fruit these days.
Fauci. It looks like the wheels are coming off the Fauci clown bus. Go and get yourself. Just go home and lie in the dark and get a whip and just flagellate yourself until you start crying, and you should feel a bit better afterwards.
It is a little bit like the flagellants now. It is kind of being back in the dark ages. You've even got the witch hunt thing going on.
Yeah, yeah, there really is, especially on social media. I have a lot of. I mean, like I said, I've been watching you for a good few years now, and I'm very impressed with. You're a great orator. That's how I would describe you. In terms of your video style, it's amazing. You could just sit there and do a 10-minute video, and never trip up over your words like I often do. And yeah, let's start a bit for my viewers who aren't privy to who you are. Can you give us a bit of a background into yourself, how you got into YouTubing, your occult history, where you're from?
Well, YouTube is interesting. I was a YouTuber. Now I'm just a content creator because YouTube is swirling down the toilet more and more thanks to the new CEO, the new and improved, definitely DC ready. Initially, it was just, you're a 2000s kid. You're watching stuff on YouTube all the time. Hey, why don't I get a webcam and make crappy videos of me laughing at the effects? And that was the first few videos that I made, was just playing around with the webcam. And then it sort of went from there. Initially, I didn't do anything politically related. Really, it was because I was an atheist at the time. It was anti-religious content and theogens like, weed and LSD and stuff, talking about drugs, basically. And then it sort of evolved from there. And around the time of the 2016 election, after Sargon of Akkad actually shouted me out in his due diligence video, all of a sudden things skyrocketed. And I started doing more election material, my civic ideas and stuff, and got more into politics. The occult, though, has been something I've been into always, but it was around the same time, or a little before, I started editing old occult works on magic, religious philosophy and stuff. And I've kept doing that now for years. I'm fast approaching 400 editions, actually, that I've edited over the course of 7 years or so.
Yeah, I was always very interested. I had this subscription to this fortnightly Fortean magazine called X Factor, and it was X Factor before Simon Cowell, and that kind of nonsense that has completely ruined.
Have
TV
you read any
and,
of the 14 Times material? Because they release, I think, a book every single year of especially anthropological material.
14 Times. There was. I remember on English TV back in the mid-90s, there was 14 TV with a guy called Reverend Fanfare. He was like this cool reverend who went around with like a shaved head and a motorbike, and it was kind of quite tongue-in-cheek, but it would cover things from like the Loch Ness Monster to spontaneous combustion. So I used to, I was into that from an early age. I remember going out with a goth chick in Sweden who was big into Crowleyism, and I was like, "There's some bad vibes from that stuff." So I wasn't too into that kind of thing. I was raised a good Catholic lad, but then sometimes you look at the Vatican, you're like, "What are they building in there?" What's going on in the Vatican?
Well, don't they have a statue of Martin Luther now out in the little area, the rotunda of the Vatican?
As in the Reformation man himself.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's more than a meme.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, look at this heretic. We killed 1 million of his followers, but hey, religious tolerance.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, I often, I'd say the Vatican has its own like Indiana Jones warehouse, just full of very interesting artifacts. But I have so many questions. It's where do we go? We've got over to the intro. Fair play to you. And I in my notes, you're a great orator, so I actually put that down in my notes. How do you prepare for your videos? Because it's something that I would like to get into more. But it's just, I suppose it's something that I personally need to just sit down and have a plan. What am I going to talk about for this 10-minute? Because a 10-minute video seems to be like the golden length for a YouTube video.
Yeah. Well, now the kids these days use TikTok, and 10 seconds is more on point. But
short form.
Yeah. I don't think I want to join the Chinese spyware app bloated with bots and shills. But if I did, it would be for trolling purposes. So stay tuned. What I do is I have a notepad file where I have like the description. It's ready to cut and paste and stuff. I have the title and links and so forth, but I've never used a script because for a while I tried to. This was many years ago. Those videos aren't even extant. I tried to have like a series of notes next to where I'm recording, the webcam feed at the middle, so that I can look into the camera. And I found it didn't work for me. I found it worked better if I just spoke off the cuff, because I can just flow from one idea to another. Some people would call it stream of consciousness. They don't like it as much. It's less refined, but really it's also more authentically like the YouTube experience of the 2000s, early 2010s. The heavy editing and custom thumbnails thing wasn't so much a thing at that time. And so I just got used to it. I did it for so many years that I can't really change it up. It would look awkward, I think, if I started doing a bunch of jump cut edits and custom thumbnails and stuff. People would be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, because I've noticed that about Luke Radowski of We Are Change.
Mm-hmm.
I usually like that's my kind of like daily news roundup. I'll watch We Are Change because he kind of just. But I find a lot of his videos are kind of like his thumbnails are like, "Oh my god, they're finally doing it," and like crazy arrows pointing to stuff. I'm like, who knocks up his JPEGs?
Random emojis in the title, randomly capitalized words like bombshell, boom, and stuff like that. That has become the new go-to thing to try to get extra clicks on these sites.
Yeah, I'm not really like for me, like I like my production value level is bare minimum. I play guitar and I sing, and I'll do some very loose breaking balls humor wise, but other than that, it's pretty lo-fi. And I think this is probably the biggest guest I've had on since I did a podcast with Eddie Bravo there on the Hardy Books podcast I did a few years ago, where I asked him, could you please have Google Chrome and a pair of headphones so we can do this, and he had neither, so I had to record it on my phone and a Zoom recorder, and it took me about like 4 days to get it. But it was a pretty cool guy to get on. He was like, "Yo, dude, I got a question for you, man." I was like, "Go on." He goes, "You married to the ball?" I'm like, "Am I what?" "You married to the ball." I'm like, "What does that mean?" "The earth, dude. Is it flat?" I was like, "Oh, I try to avoid this topic conversation, and I shan't be. We will be leaving it there as well. Don't want to get people debating the spherical versus flat argument.
The Earth is clearly a trapezoid.
A trapezoid, a rhombus. So when did you get into your occult interests? Would that start from an early age yourself?
Well, in high school, I started looking up grimoires and things like that. I had actually printed out several of them. I can't remember what the Ars Goetia and a few others. And I was always sort of interested in superstition and magic and things like that. Even though I was a nominal Christian, I was raised a liberal Christian. For a while, was more religious than that. But even then, I was interested in the concept of mysticism. Even if you read the Bible, you find like the Witch of Endor and all this other stuff in there. It's constant. It's in basically every book. There's all sorts of weird stuff happening. And I always thought it was kind of funny, actually, because most of the mainline like Christians, especially the more religious ones, they don't want to talk about that aspect. It's like you don't hear sermons on the Song of Solomon, where he's lusting over one of his slaves and talking about oral sex and stuff like that. All of these taboo topics that are not for the pulpit.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of omissions in the Bible. A lot of books that probably didn't really fit the agenda there when it came to the Constantine and the merging of paganism with Christianity there. But we got Owen Lennon says, "Wow, Hardy Books meets Styyx. This is a new era of internet magic. You better believe it, Owen. You better believe it." But it's pretty cool.
The new tech era is upon us.
Yeah, like I say, there's a lot of interesting things I wanted to, a lot of ground to cover. Let me see where. Let's keep it going. There's a lot of questions here. And how did you end up getting into the political analysis then as well? On top of that.
Yeah, well, I had been doing some political material as early as like 2010, 2011. I was in sort of the Ron Paul revolution mood at the time. Still like Ron Paul, don't like the gold standard idea because I understand basic economics. But I liked him, voted for him actually in 2012, wrote him in. Couldn't stand Romney, definitely wasn't voting for Obama again at that point. Yeah, Gitmo is still open. We're still at war. What gives? You haven't done any of the things I elected you for. And then it sort of morphed from there. My views largely haven't changed either. It's funny because initially expressing views that are, at least 90% similar to the ones I have now, people thought that I was a liberal. I thought so too, and voted for Obama and stuff. Then people say, well, he's a libertarian. And now all of a sudden I'm supposedly a far-right Nazi or something like that, even though the views haven't changed at all. The cultural paradigm of people who are on the left, especially, I think has changed massively because they were all in lockstep at the time. The first success I had was on Facebook. Ironically enough, I had several groups that I administered there with thousands and thousands of people on them back when that meant something on Facebook. There were dedicated anti-war groups, people sharing videos and stuff of war footage and so forth, activism, change.org petitions and shit. And that was a big thing. I don't see any anti-war rhetoric from them now. They're too busy burning books.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that because I myself would consider myself like classical left, and I think the Overton window has definitely shifted to a point where anybody who associates themselves with being a lefty these days is they're statists or pro-authoritarian.
Well, look at what happened. Glenn Greenwald is listed as a far-right commentator on Wikipedia. Glenn Greenwald, of all people, co-founder of The Intercept, the main man of Substack, literally a Bernie Sanders-style progressive, but he's far-right.
I suppose by today's standards, Bernie Sanders would be known as far-right. I think all these groups, like for me personally, I was over in New York in 2011, and I was down at the Occupy Wall Street movement, and it seems that the Occupy Wall Street it was so big in terms of its international pull and the fact that it had been replicated in other countries around the world where you had a group of people I suppose back like 10 years ago, there was no talk of left versus right. I think this is something that has come up as a diversionary tactic, as part of a polarizing way of breaking up whatever opposition it was to Wall Street and big capitalist finance and stakeholder capitalism. And I think somewhere along the line, they've had people come in as agent provocateurs who've infiltrated these movements and have basically muddied the water and diverted a lot of people through the lines of intersectional politics and identity politics. Whereas for me, what I've always tried to do is bring everybody together in terms of like, look, we all have the same wants and needs, and it's trivial arguing over people. Like nowadays, people are focusing more on what they don't have in common in terms of what they do have in common. And we all have in common that we're all being kind of plunged into a war of attrition in terms of poverty, and the fact that there's less and less opportunity with automation, with like the likes of these asset management companies like BlackRock and Vanguard that are just basically mopping everything up. And then you have the likes of Soros or Klaus Schwab who are putting in billions into these NGOs that are, they seem to be kind of like the men on the ground that kind of foment, I suppose, uncertainty. So I think,
and a big part of that is the left has been corrupted away from like the Occupy thing. Originally, it was don't bail out the corporations, but then Obama inserts id poll and others on his behalf. Hey, you're racist if you don't want to do what Obama wants to do. And I think it's really the first term of Obama's when the id poll movement starts. I don't think it'll last forever. I think people are beginning to wake up. I think we see that not just in U.S. politics at this point. There's graffiti not far from here in the middle of Enschede, the city where I'm living, about Klaus Schwab that's been up there since the COVID lockdowns begin. I always take heart in these things.
It sounds like a bit of graffiti that's well known around Dublin, which is Bono is a pox. And it's like U2 tax dodgers. So someone around Dublin has become famous for writing the fact that U2, I think they moved to Holland. They moved their base of operations as a company to Holland to avoid to take advantage of the lower tax breaks over there. Mm-hmm. So, and then Bono as well. He's up there with Bush, Blair, the World Economic Forum. I have questions on this topic. Basically, do you think that we are living in a neo-feudal system where instead of it being kings, we're now beholden to the interests of major mega corporations and, like I said, the like of BlackRock or Vanguard?
It has elements of that, but I think it's basically the next wave of communism more than anything. If you look at communism as just a puristic economic system, of course, we're not following that. If you look at the Chinese model spawned towards the end of the Cold War by the West reaching out to China, you'll see that model works so well for the people at the top that everyone else has, in a vague form, they've copied it. Look around on the streets. You see people in masks, just like in Beijing. You see supposedly intellectual liberals clamoring for the equivalent of a social credit score. You see governments using emergencies, which are usually prefaced on nothing but fear-mongering, to expand their power. You see the fusion of corporations and governments in a quasi-fascistic manner, which, according to any proper interpretation of Marx, what the Chinese are doing is closer to Mussolini than anything else. It's very, very interesting. You have cultures that say we're a liberal republic, we're a constitutional system, we're democracy, we're communist, but they all fall under what you could term quasi-fascism. And that's because they've realized it allows them to centrally appropriate goods and information flow, and they can cast it off as whatever they want according to what the society thinks it wants at the time. And they can engineer what the society wants through their media partners. We see literal fascism when we see the Biden administration, for example, in the US, actually giving marching orders to elements of the legacy media, which has been bragged about by CNN's Oliver Darcy on economic news. So, I mean, globalism is a cancer. And the thing is, left-wing individuals, right-wing centrists, separatists, like a libertarian survivalist, even people who have some statist tendencies, literally none of them benefit from the globalism that's going on in the current order.
Yeah, it seems like you say. I always thought that the definition of fascism was a kind of a universal merging of state with government in order to crush any dissent.
Well, a state with corporate interests, yeah.
And
that's sort of what China's done. And I've used this analogy. In China, they have a very free market system as long as you toe the line. And that line is ever changing, because that's what communism typically does to keep people on their feet and to keep people under control. Where we're adopting the same thing in the Western world, all prefaced on the China virus, which was engineered in a lab there with US money in part. It's technically a global conspiracy.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about the Wu flu, as I call it, what I can't understand is a lot, like the people who are, you know, coming out in their bios, get tested, stay at home, wear a mask, don't be selfish, you'll kill granny. All these guys, they don't care where it came from. Like it's like, imagine if you were in a room and there was a hornet's nest outside, and someone opened up the window and the hornets flew in and stung everybody. And you'd be wondering who was the idiot who left the window open to the wasps or the hornets, you know. Whereas the people don't worry, I don't care who made this. I don't care. All I care is about, we need to get rid of the hornets. And it's kind of like nobody's questioning the origin of this. No one's questioning the fact that it's now come out, and it has been known for a long time. But everybody or anybody who came out with the lab leak theory, for example, was called a crazy tinfoil conspiracy crackpot. And now it turns out, especially with the new Project Veritas papers, that they, that even DARPA refused. All right, good luck. Even DARPA refused the funding of the gain of function research.
Yeah. And they knew that the lab leak was at the very least very likely.
Yeah,
and they lied flat out to people. Part of it is these people have investments in China. That's the other side of globalism, is when people are cross-investing all across the world, it makes revealing the crimes of a country or whatever very difficult, because everyone that's donating to the political party in power in the US, they have money in China and stuff too. And I'd like to posit something else. If people think China's not still engaged in their bioweapons research, which is dubiously legal under international conventions they've signed anyway, then they're nuts. They're not going to stop at, hey, we engineered a virus, we took care of 25% of our demographic problem. Ha ha ha, a bunch of people died. I'm sure that they're overjoyed. I'm sure that they laugh about the fact that the Western media, controlled as it is by sponsors that do business in China like Nike and Apple, I'm sure that they're very happy about that, but they're going to keep designing new viruses. It worked so well and they face no repercussions. Why would they stop now? You can look forward to other Chinese leaks from their labs in the future.
Well, it just seems like the perfect business model, that it's like, oh, something else has come out. How unfortunate. Oh, we need to take this new batch of medical procedures to combat. You know, that is the other question regarding those forces that are in power. What's stopping them from just leaking a vial of this in an orchestrated effort in different major international airports? What's stopping this from happening? You know,
nothing.
Yeah,
I personally, I believe that the Chinese and and elements of the U.S. government partnered up to make this to solve a demographic problem. That is, China's got a huge, because of their one-child system being there for so long, they've got a massive number of people who are approaching old age and a very small number of people to replace them. The problem is that they were betting on their economy being fully industrialized by now because of foreign investment, but that foreign investment for the last decade has slowly decreased. There aren't enough positions, there's not enough output to take care of all the old people. So enter COVID, which they're undercounting their death totals by an order of magnitude or more, kills off 20, 30 million old people. Those people, they don't have to be taken care of in homes. Their assets and so forth go to that younger generation that otherwise would be strangulated. There's no room for growth in China because they're so densely populated. So they had to reduce the population and allow that to flow down to the people that are younger, the entrepreneurs, the middle class, as they continue their effort to industrialize. The Chinese economy in 5 years without demographic correction, which is what they would term it, will collapse. The US economy has similar problems. The birth rate keeps dropping among virtually all groups within the United States, and the baby boomers are starting to retire. well, unless you want to free up federal lands for the young people to go to and be survivalists, which none of them want to do since no one wants to farm because the government's made it incapable of being sustainable, you have to kill people off that are older who have all the wealth and resources, and then it can filter down. Some of it filters down to keep the peasants, the peons happy. The rest of it gets bought up by BlackRock at 0% interest, no less. It's very interesting how all of these things coincidentally coincide at exactly the same time in multiple nations.
Yeah, the other thing is, I can't. What I find puzzling about the whole thing is, it was the first time that the West ever took China's lead in handling. I mean, the thing is, if I knew this was going to happen, and this was in January of 2020, then you can bet your bottom dollar foreign ministers and intelligence services knew this was going to happen, and it was like it was allowed to happen. Like the planes and the international travel was open, and then everyone's wearing face masks, and who's manufacturing the face masks? Somebody has made a lot of money out of this.
Well, the COVID tests tend to be made in China. They're making quite a bit of money. The fabric for the cloth masks, even the custom-made ones that you can get from a million Etsy vendors, the cloth is from China, or at least contains dye from China. The N95s that they're trying to mass manufacture now because, oh my God, Omicron's more transmissible. Well, where are they going to be manufactured? There's no U.S. manufacturer that's going to do it unless they're using, again, material imported from China. It shows how China is the root of all evil in the world today, but it's not just really China. It's the Chinese mentality that was built in the wake of them opening up, especially in the 80s when they had their counter revolutionary sentiment there. And they said, well, I still got a bunch of peasants and stuff. Why don't we industrialize more instead of just farming rice? And then all of our problems begin. It's sort of like the problems with Russian diplomatic influence. Technically speaking, it's because the West under Nixon mainly in the 70s begins opening up and trying to use détente, trying to use the Coca-Cola bottle to draw these countries out of authoritarian systems. Well, they were willing to forsake, at least on the surface, authoritarian economics because they can still get their cut. It doesn't matter as long as the productivity is there, they get their cut. But they never left behind the social authoritarianism. China is a tyrannical country run by an oligarchy of old geeks, and probably will be for some time to come. I notice people will say, well, China's enslaving Muslims in camps in Western China to grow cotton or make textiles. Well, what about the human slavery that goes on and it involves U.S. businesses and European businesses and all these others? What about their investment in nations that do blood diamond mining to increase the scope of the mining there? and the De Beers connection, again, to the Western world through Europe and the United States. The globalistic
Foxconn.
Yeah, the globalistic economy allows, it's like with the TPP that Trump killed when he got elected, thankfully, that Hillary Clinton loved so much till she revised her own book because people hated it. The only thing that it would have done, it wouldn't help small businesses. It would have helped a business in China or Vietnam or the Philippines or something, a big mega corporation, to screw with people in the US or Japan. It would have allowed a US business to go into Taiwan and screw workers there. All it would have done is lower wages and make more money for the people at the top. And somehow this is held up as a good thing by people who are supposedly on the left wing. They're not exactly, there's not a hammer and sickle anymore. It's more like a diamond and a cell phone.
Well, I once read, I can't remember where I read it, probably about 10 years ago, there was an article that said communism and capitalism are in bed together. And I never really understood what that meant until recently. And I think the likes of Nike and Apple, and I know these virtue signaling multinational corporations, what they've done is they've hijacked artificially created social division, and they virtue signal in terms of Western issues, such as, I'll take one thing, for example, Nike, the way it talks about body positivity, and it would market for the larger individual. But at the same time, who's manufacturing these garments in China, or Vietnam or Cambodia?
Yeah, instead of focusing on the abuse and human misery, you're supposed to focus on whatever in-group that same company has created. So I'm gay and Nike says it's okay to be gay, so I'll buy their products. I shouldn't worry too much about the 10-year-old that made the sneakers. I think it might be part of a long-term, much larger, even more sinister plot than just trying to make money, though. Imagine that they have it in mind to effectively use this progressive system that they're building, the IDPOL and so forth, to get people to the point where they can establish effectively a one-world system off paper that's inescapable in scope. That is, you would no longer have like the Chinese system, the US system, et cetera. They would all begin to resemble one another so much that everything would just be effectively theater.
Yeah, it seems that these companies, they basically step over any sovereign nation in terms of their constitution. It's almost like if you look at Pfizer, for example, now, they're basically calling the shots, these huge pharma companies. And it seems like, you're supposed, like, that's the other thing I was going to go on to is mainstream media or the legacy media has no credibility. And even like Joe Rogan, one man with a podcast who is a stoner bro who, lifts kettlebells and does UFC and stand up.
Fear factor, man.
Fear factor, yeah. Swim with these rats while blindfolded. This is the kind of thing where now Joe Rogan, the fear factor man, is completely wiping the floor with CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Is this that? Are we seeing a sea change, like in terms of your average person who is in the middle consuming and blindly following and trusting the news are now waking up and realizing that the jig is up and that they've been lied to? I mean, if you Danish that came out and apologized recently, that signals that it's kind of like rats jumping from a sinking ship now. And all these blue checkmark merchants are coming out saying, "Oh yeah, what's going on? When are we going to get our freedom back? When are things going back to normal?" But 6 months ago, they would have down the throat of anybody who questioned the narrative.
Well, that's also why you have some groups astroturfing themselves, like BreadTube. BreadTube has been now revealed objectively to take state money from the UK government in order to spread propaganda. Well, on the surface, they look very grassroots, don't they? But the algorithms always tend to favor them. I wonder who gave them that idea. That's the big warning for the next few years isn't even about the lamestream media. People are cutting the cable and canceling their papers unless they have a parrot and they need to shred it up so the parrot can shit all over it, which is what the New York Times is good for. What people need to be worried now, what people need to be worried about, especially with regards to YouTube, Facebook, and pages that have priority systems, is astroturfing. That is, you'll think that the creator's independent. Oh, they're just getting my super chat money. They're just getting, revenue through Google AdSense or something. That's the basis of their income. And it turns out that's not true. There are a number of Twitch streamers that were leaked, I think, a couple months ago, including people who pretend to be grassroots that are getting paid 6-7 figures just to have a presence there. Well, I mean, they're getting the super chats. They're getting the sponsorship deals. They're getting all this other money, and yet they're being paid by groups that have direct ties through their parent company, which I think is Amazon for Twitch, with governments and with other major corporations. It's an astroturfing attempt. What they're trying to do is hijack the move away from corporate media, and they're trying to insert people who are technically corporate media, but they don't act like it, into the mix and then favor them silently in order to absorb the audience that used to be gravitating towards genuinely independent news sources. When you see people that are algorithmically throttled or outright banned and end up using new tech, those are generally going to be the people that are actually telling the truth. The ones that the algorithm favors, they're growing rapidly and they're getting all this money and stuff. Most of those people, not a minority, but I believe most of those people are effectively government plants. It doesn't necessarily mean a Western government. China has people that it pays too. Look at it this way. Marjorie Taylor Greene gets kicked off Twitter, but Xinhua News, which is literal Chinese state propaganda, that Chinese people can't even interact with Twitter, by the way, they're still there along with all of their executives. And I think half of them have blocked me, actually, for trolling me. I'm very proud of this.
But I think anybody who has been purged or banned from YouTube, for example, or Twitter, they're saying something that is basically undermining the official narrative, and the official narrative doesn't benefit your average person on the street. It's just there are people out there who still don't get it. I think what we're seeing now in terms of, let's say, that for the last 2 years, backpedaling and changing of stats and saying people died with instead of, and we're going to see a big change, and then what I think is going to happen one day, all the restrictions will be lifted, and then it will be, oh yeah, it's just focus on your life now. You've got your freedom back. Don't pay any attention to the people who've brought this, or the billionaire class who have seriously been enriched while smaller businesses have been absolutely destroyed. But there are people out there on Twitter, for example, who they get angry when you try to tell them that they've been manipulated and they've had their life severely interrupted for 2 years. I can't understand if why wouldn't, rather than go, okay, I have been wrong. I can't understand why there's this reluctance to. It's like what Mark Twain said: it's easier to fool the people than to let them know that they've been fooled. It's
well, that's not a partisan thing either. It's like Dan Crenshaw a couple of days ago completely selling out. I had warned people about him for the last year, and I got pushback from people on the right. Well, no, he's our guy. He's a populist, and I could see through him, but no one wanted to believe it until a few days ago when he's like, oh, well, Liz Cheney has a backbone. Let's be clear. She's speaking her mind and she needs to be respected for that. Or
Cheney, a man who helped bring America into two wars.
Or Ted Cruz. I made a song mocking him back during the 2016 election about how he was a loser, technically not even eligible to serve in the presidency. And there are people that were taken in by his con. But I called it the second that there was that dust up. I don't know if you remember it from the Euro side about the NSA spying. Remember, the federal court had said the NSA can't hold all of this user data that it's compiled. And Rand Paul and Ted Cruz staged a filibuster to prevent it from being renewed, from them being able to continue spying. And at the 11th hour, Ted Cruz cocked because he got a concession, if you can call it that, from the Democrats. Well, the data will still be there and still be collected, but it has to be stored by the private companies themselves. So we're not going to store the DMs that people had on YouTube. YouTube has to store them, and then we just ask them for it when at our leisure. Well, Rand Paul didn't cuck. He continued. He was clearly angry. Ted Cruz did. And at the time, I called it a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, and the spying is still going on. Look at what was happening in Canada this whole time. Apparently, something like 87% of Canadians had their user data monitored by the government during the height of the pandemic. Well, that's prefaced on X-Keyscore and all of those same tools that were developed by the NSA in the first place. They're exactly the same. They're part of the same intel apparatus. And people are astonished at how it's happening.
Do I think Trudeau is quite the wolf in sheep's clothing?
Yeah. Well, no, he's more like a coyote in a wolf's clothing.
Well, it seems that Trudeau, it seems he's been obviously put into the position he's in. He's been groomed for the part. He's a World Economic Forum dude, and it seems most of our world leaders, as I would think, are basically television leaders. Yeah, they're all they're all serving Davos, and we don't even know who Davos is actually serving behind the scenes. But Canada, it seems like Austria is now going ahead with charging anybody who hasn't even taken a medical procedure €3,600 a month. Can you see the people of Austria, actually putting up with that? Or Australia now has turned into an authoritarian state?
Well, the biggest problem is that there's still at least a majority of the public that has no problem with these things. They may not openly support it, but it doesn't bother them so much because they're like, well, I got the booster, I feel fine. So why can't they just? Why don't they just show their papers? Why don't they just put lick the jackboot like I do? And there are people like that. The problem is the frog has been boiled now for 2 years. All of the things that are being done now, it was considered a conspiracy theory if you suggested they would ever be done a year or a year and a half ago. But people slowly got used to more and more and more. Unfortunately, I don't think the authoritarian aspect will go away, or at least not in full. Pandemic will be declared over, but people will still be wearing masks. People will still be in the concentration camp because they didn't have a vaccine. They'll still be harassed by police because they went to the store and didn't show their papers. I genuinely think that will continue in many parts of the world, and not most of the US, because there's a different constitutional system. Not in countries, maybe like even here in the Netherlands, where there's huge pushback. There's been pushback in Austria, but I don't think it's enough. Same with Australia. It'll just be cast off as this small group of hippie nutters that don't like vaccines. This small group of conspiracy theorists is making life difficult for everyone else. Let's punish them. And some people will be receptive to that message.
They like to latch on to words like very, like for example, the word anti-vaxxer has been used to just as a one catch-all for anybody that has any questions, doubts, reservations, wanting informed consent. It's just it's quite there's quite a devious moral high ground that is taken. In the likes of there was that guy Michael Hiltzik who said the original name of the comment, I think it was the LA Times, was why we should dance on the graves of COVID hesitant, or whatever it was called, or vaccine hesitant.
Yeah,
this is sick shit. You know what I mean?
It's sort of like the propaganda you saw in the dawn of the Soviet Union or the NSDAP or even Pol Pot's Cambodia, actually. And I'd like to point out that a lot of those so-called anti-vaxxers are vaccinated, because at this point, 1 or 2 vaccines is considered unvaccinated, or at least under-vaccinated. And some people, they said, well, I got the vaccine. I'm not afraid of Omicron, though. I'm not going to bother again. They're lumped in with the anti-vaxxers. And it's interesting. A large proportion of all the people that were very quick to get the vaccine when it was available at first didn't get the booster. With each successive step, more and more people are hesitant. They're just seeing how far they can take it before the vast majority of the population says no.
Well, now they're saying in Ireland that, there's this, the Irish, I think it was the Times in England, if I'm not mistaken, came out with, I saw something today on Twitter where they're saying hundreds of thousands of boosters are at risk of being binned in Ireland. It's like,
well, that's okay, because the company that made them already got paid, so yeah. Everyone's happy.
There's a friend of mine who I tried to talk to about these kind of things, and he's he said, hey, they're free. So he's like, they're free. They don't cost anything. I'm like, you don't understand. It's been taken out of your tax. It's been taken out of the globe. Yeah. Every nation has to pay tax for this. They've already been paid, and it's crazy. How
I chuckle when people still think it'll be free community college for everyone, free healthcare, free this, free that. It's like, okay, it is definitely free if you're in the very lowest class of society, because you're not paying any taxes. The government pays you for existing and making too little money. If you pay taxes at all, though, those taxes are up a little bit.
I have a question as well, Styyx. The difference in the United States compared to when you were growing up. I mean, like yesterday I was watching the Estranged video by Guns N' Roses, and it was back in the era where America was still, in the era of Planet Hollywood. It was this beacon of freedom and democracy for the rest of the world. And it kind of looked like I was watching videos of or a video about the train robberies that are going on, or like the Union Pacific trains are being opened up in downtown LA. And
yeah, I saw that.
Being pulled out, and I was watching the All Gas No Brakes or Channel 5 News, where he was at a punk convention in LA, and I was looking at it. I was like, this. It's almost like America now looks like a 1980s interpretation of a dystopian America, like Escape from LA, or something like The Warriors.
Yeah. I would say it's a good movie, by the way. I would say that it's reverted back to the 70s with the rising crime, the IDPOL thing, all the inflation. It's really much like the mid 70s, and even like my dad, who lived through it at the time, has pointed this out, that it more resembles that. But I would say that a lot of Americans live in larger urban areas. They live in or near a big city. That's more than half the population. They're going to see much more of this. When I went back to Rutland, with the exception of, you have to wear a mask in some of the different stores you go to, nothing has changed. I went back to Woodstock, which is a very small village on the east side of Vermont. that I hadn't been in I think 10 years. Well, other than very, very briefly. Yeah, no, I hadn't been there for a very long time. This is where I grew up when I was a little kid. I moved 3 days before I started high school. I moved to Rutland, but I'd been in Woodstock. It's like 1,400 people, so it's a village. Nothing changed. It was almost a weird feeling going back, because I'm like, it's like stepping back in time. The only thing really that changed, one of the shops on Main Street had closed, which was a knitting shop. So who gives a shit anyway? And then the parking meters had become electronic. That's it. Everything else, the signs probably hadn't even been painted in the last 20 years. There's no spike in crime. There's no change in the culture. Everything's the same. Oh yeah, they had a couple of hipster cafes that went up. They've got more restaurants now. It's otherwise it's the same. Rutland has changed very, very little, other than, again, there are a few more box stores. There's less empty homes, because peak recession, about a quarter of them were under. They were foreclosed. In small town America, and indeed probably in small towns in most of the world, unless somebody discovers diamonds next door and a mine goes up, there's not a huge amount of change. It's limited. The crime skyrocketing in the U.S. is like 90% just in a handful of big cities, and not even all of them.
Do you think? I mean, like it looks to me, right, as a observer of what's happening in the States. First of all, I think the Biden administration is probably going to go down as one of the worst in recent memory.
Already has.
It almost seems like they're trying. If you look at the World Economic Forum's 2030 predictions for the United States, it says the States will not be a leading power. It'll be one of 5 or 6 leading powers. But it almost looks like, I mean, it doesn't almost look like, it looks like they're basically trying to destroy the United States. Like, the United States was never, its foreign policies was abysmal. It's, obviously been under the yoke of big business and big pharma and insurance companies, mandatory insurance, health insurance policies. And there's been a lot of arbitrary rules that if you're kind of, you're being taxed into oblivion, let's say. And it looks like they are dismantling the United States as we know it in order to, destroy and rebuild for this great reset. Do you think that's...
No, I think that it's an attempt to denigrate the United States as the main monopolar power of the world, to usher in a multipolar system, because they've got their hands in all of these countries. And so the only real threat left to them is a resurgence of populism that makes the US again more powerful, because in a monopolar world, it's very difficult to have globalism, because the people in the US that are represented will demand more wages. They'll demand more military power. They'll demand to be able to govern things as they see fit. They'll demand more liberty because things are going well. There's no pressing reason that they would ask for more government, or for the government to cuck and sell out to China or something. If you have a multipolar world, you can pretend to hate each other. You can keep your proxy wars, which are never actually, for the most part, about nations actually fighting over territory. Taiwan and East Ukraine may be absent at this point. Generally speaking, the proxy wars are some person had an idea in one of these, like Gaddafi, that he wanted to make his own currency and form a syndicated sort of union of non-aligned states. Well, we can't have that, because then none of the major powers would have enough military capability to do regime change, and they might start actually being independent. What if they spawn a libertarian mentality? Shit, there'll be a new land of the free, and then all of a sudden our monopoly on that faux concept will dry up. That's why I support libertarianism and populism, because I want the United States to function well. I think we should be using our diplomatic might to export the concept to other nations, so we can have sort of a Delian League world in which you have different states, the people look out for themselves, people leave each other alone within that general sort of syndicated sphere. They don't have war because they don't need it. They stay strong, but at the same time, they all have their own cultures. People mind their own business, and they enjoy more freedom as opposed to more government.
Yeah, it seems that, like Gaddafi, as eccentric as he was, he had a lot of very progressive plans. Like there was the creation of the gold-backed dinar, the irrigation of the Nile Delta using the runoff from the Nile River that was going to the sea. What do you think personally of Gaddafi as a leader? Was he a mad bastard, or was he on point with a lot of things?
Both. And there's the problem, because when the propagandists in the West trying to justify regime change that now has led to millions of slaves being held in open air markets, and Islamofascism spawned worldwide, ISIS took command of a large swath of the country, they'll just say, well, Gaddafi was evil and insane. Well, yeah, so is Bashar al-Assad, but he's certainly better than the alternative. His people were living a relatively decent lifestyle by the standards of the region. They were reasonably well off. You didn't have Islamofascists rising up because they got killed. Same with Saddam Hussein. We never should have bothered taking him out either.
I remember watching, I think it was Bitter Lake by Adam Curtis, when they spoke about, was it when Roosevelt was, when they discovered large oil fields and natural resources in Saudi Arabia, that the Saudi royal family said, we'll take your technology, we'll take your money, but leave our religion alone. And that the Wahhabism that we see that's so prevalent today globally was funded through American money and was then spread using Saudi money in madrasas across the Middle East and Africa. Yeah. So it seems like big oil has kind of created that monster as well. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, at least in part. I would say basically after World War II, when the Allies were doing an autopsy of the war, they realized, hey, the Nazis probably would have fallen a lot faster if they hadn't moved into Middle Eastern areas and controlled these resources in North Africa and in Arabia and been friendly with these regimes. We can't let the commies get a hold of it. We got to starve them for energy. So we're going to move in and do regime change. And then it starts basically with Eisenhower, who had been a general in World War II, coincidentally, in Iran. And then in the 1970s, we helped Iran. Then we helped Saddam. We gave him intel and let him gas the Iranians at one point. Well, nobody ever remembers this, or the first failed invasion of Iraq when we could have taken over, under Herbert Walker. Nobody even remembers those in the context of the struggles that happen now. You don't even hear about Iraq anymore. They're still destabilized.
Wasn't it Rumsfeld who'd armed Saddam? Because there's photographs of Rumsfeld standing with hands next to, he was the attack dog that was sent to fight Iran.
We had been on the Iranian side, do regime change there, switch to Saddam. Then we said, well, we don't like you either, because Saddam, stopped being friendly, basically.
The border adjustment in Kuwait.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that this is what I like about Ron Paul, because he's never changed his stance on non-interventionism. Yeah. The Constitution decrees that obviously they should have a standing militia to combat enemies, foreign and domestic, but there was nothing that says you should then expand to be a global police force or an empire. And now we have a kind of a strange dichotomy where if America was to start scaling back, who fills the vacuum then?
That's the whole problem. I actually support. I don't support wars of adventure or aggression. What I would say is that it is good the U.S. have a very beefy Navy, because all of those shipping lanes in the world, and we saw what one shipping ship getting sideways in the Suez Canal did to the world's supply of goods for literally a month. If the U.S. Navy doesn't do it, there are no other navies sophisticated and large enough to do it. Literally, just piracy and the possibility of a third world nation deciding to take over the wrong tanker could throw the entire world's economy into uproar. I don't have a problem with huge U.S. military spending, although I challenge whether we need the ratio that we currently have. I think that NATO partners can take up a little more slack. But the U.S., after World War II, focused heavily on Navy and air. Everyone else was still building more tanks. And that really has become a problem, because no other nation even has the budget for the next 20 years to be able to come close to the U.S. Navy. And without that, piracy alone off the coast of Africa and in parts of the Caribbean and stuff would completely flummox the world economy.
Another interesting question in terms of geopolitics. What is Hillary Clinton's beef with Russia and the Democrats constantly, using Russia as this bogeyman fall guy? Where does that originate from?
They don't have a problem with Russia. The Clintons did dirty dealings there, and especially with their ally, the Chinese. They're more China adjacent because there's more money to be made. They don't have a problem with Russia. They had a problem with Trump. And the entire thing that was spun, the entire big lie of Russiagate, was just spawned for political reasons. And the Russians aren't going to do anything about it. Think about it. Putin comes out and says, well, that never happened. I don't even like the fucker about Donald Trump. They'll say, look, it's disinformation. See, this is proof that Putin and Trump get along and he's controlled by Putin. There was literally nothing that he could have done about it. So he just stayed out of it. Trump couldn't dissuade them from the attack line because the whole goal was to cripple his presidency, and it partially worked.
What do you both positive and negative scenarios for the future? We're standing at a precipice now where information is power, and the more informed, I suppose, an autodidactic informational approach is what your layperson needs to. I think what I'm trying to say is, going forward, what's the best way of having people discover information for themselves instead of being spoon-fed mainstream talking points that are divisive and ultimately muddying the water? Going forward, both negative and positive scenarios for a brighter future for everybody. What would your opinion be there?
The best case scenario is we do what we've been doing, and private innovation creates less centralized networks, free speech networks, new tech, blockchain and crypto, and all of these things figure into it. The worst case scenario actually is one that people on the right I often see promoting, and I've tried to dissuade them from this, but some of them just don't get it. And that's an attempted government solution towards the censorship of old tech. Like the government weighing in on Facebook and saying, well, we're going to investigate them for having a vertical monopoly. Do you really think that the government that promotes disinfo there and propaganda, partners with Facebook, gets money from Facebook, is actually going to rein them in? Or do you think that it's just an attempt to take more of that tech power and spread more disinfo and lock themselves into a permanent position of power? They have no intention whatsoever of fixing the problem of tech censorship. When they address it at all, it's just on the economic end. What's their suggestion for Facebook, for example? Well, we think Facebook's too big. They're manipulating, using one site to manipulate results on another, or Google with its search results is being sued by Rumble, for example, and that is manipulation, absolutely. The government will carve them apart, but then the companies are still there. Everything else is still the same. The censorship hasn't been addressed at all. What we need is private innovation, and for people to own more of their data. Like one thing that I've been doing is archiving as many books and videos and music and stuff as possible locally, because then I actually have permanent access to it. Another thing is you might want to learn to use Linux, because Microsoft at some point in the fairly near future is going to take proprietary control of the private data on your computer as well. They're already moving towards it. Apple's already doing this. They claim that it's to scan for child pornography on their devices. Bullshit. They're scanning everything that you have continuously. That's not where it will end, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. They'll take out a few perverts, a few pedophiles, and then they'll say, well, it works so well. We can scrub medical and misinformation off these devices, because all of their partners will demand it as part of that same concerted astroturfed effort. We can get rid of extremist material. We can brick people's phones if they say the wrong thing on a private conversation. And the liberals will cheer. They'll think, because they'll be sold the idea that it's an existential crisis.
But these are godlike powers that these private corporations are wielding, and who is there to administer these legitimate checks and balances?
Yeah,
no one. These companies, they're too big. Like they can character assassinate. They can actually assassinate people. They can have people locked up. They can sway the opinions of millions, and there doesn't seem to be anybody there who can resist this. I mean, do we need some sort of EMP, Snake Plissken style, just to rebuild and start from?
Yeah. While it would be nice to knock out the entire internet and start from scratch with entrepreneurship, I don't think that'll happen. Though the only solution is decentralization, proprietary control of your own material. NFTs are important in that, and the development of innovative new tech sites that follow a free speech approach. Now, the problem is the old tech sites used to do that too. YouTube used to be very free speech. It was broadcast yourself. Facebook was instrumental, for example, during the Tunisian attempted revolution there by Islamofascists. Counter protests, where were they organized? Facebook, and to an extent, Twitter. They were organized. The student demonstrations were organized there. They couldn't do that now. They'd be using Telegram, which is why the German government wants to shut them down. At the end of things, the hope is that private innovation prevails because the government ain't going to do jack.
Yeah, I think obviously I think as we see with the World Economic Forum, most of our government leaders are all put into they have their guys leading. Same in Sweden, where all of a sudden you had Magdalena Andersson, the new president, came in, and all of a sudden restrictions came in, whereas Sweden did a really good job. I mean, from what I've seen, what I've experienced in comparison to Ireland or the UK or Australia, they just gave, it was a voluntaristic approach, taking self-accountability and self-responsibility. And I think that hands-off approach, though it was for the first year or so completely demonized by mainstream publications in most Western countries, it actually
that happened in the U.S. with Florida, Texas, and a few other states, the Dakotas, and now they're doing better than the states that fully locked down. I wonder why.
What's her name? The governor, Noam.
Kristi Noem.
Kristi Noem. Yeah, she seems like that's the kind of leader you want. Someone who has kids, who obviously has a vested interest in the future. And she seems quite balanced. Anything I've seen from her, she seems level. We need level-headed, conscientious leaders.
Well, the most level-headed on that level is DeSantis.
Do you think DeSantis will run for election in 2024?
If Trump doesn't run, then DeSantis would be probably the most powerful potential candidate. He'd have nearly half the party solidified behind him on day one. I would prefer Rand Paul, who has also stood against lockdownerism and things like that, and he's a physician, which helps.
Yeah, and he's taken on Fauci.
But DeSantis would be good. I can't think of any Democrats that I would vote for. A lot of people say, "Well, Tulsi can still pull it off." No, thanks.
Well, she doesn't really. She doesn't fit the bill as being a Democrat now, and I suppose that's the other problem with American politics. It's this two-party system. Other than you got the Libertarian Party, but they're never really going to do anything. But you see the likes of Tulsi Gabbard, who is again a service officer or a veteran, and again non-interventionalism, and
she's too anti-gun for me.
Yeah, I mean, we've grown the thing is also the gun issue in the States. There's no taking. I mean, it's built into the fabric of the nation. It's too late to do anything about people who say, "Oh, we've got to take guns away and whatnot," or "We got to have more gun rights." It is what it is. I think that the best way going forward is to have good gun discipline and education. I think that's because they're always going to end up into the hands of criminals anyway. Even in Europe, you've got criminals, you've got crime gangs in Europe that get their hands on guns. I think like that conversation, it's not going to happen. So again, I've not. This is coming from a European who's in Ireland. You own a gun. It's a very difficult process. But I personally understand that the Second Amendment is a very important part of the American Constitution, and
only if people continuously support it though and refuse to back down. We should be gaining ground as opposed to holding ground on the issue. We should abolish the NFT. I should be able to mail order a machine gun, and that's not hyperbole.
But the thing is as well, no one's really talking about the fact that so many people are addled with SSRIs and like the mental health issue in the States is, anybody who has any sort of anything remotely wrong with them, and according to the DSM handbook, as just given a whole cocktail of different drugs to take and antipsychotics, and that has a huge implication on how people think. But that's my 2 cents on it. But I do watch the Ron Paul Liberty Report very, very often. I think he's a cozy old man who's I think the more people.
Just a sec. You all right? Okay. Liz got water down the wrong way, I think.
All right, it went down the Guinness pipe, as they'd say.
Yeah. Which actually reminds me, I have to go off here.
Yeah, no worries. I think we've had an excellent chat. It's been a fascinating and amazing discussion with you. I was going to say one question before you go. Are you a metal fan? Was that,
Yeah. But I like the more classic metal. I like Black Sabbath and stuff like that.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, Styyx, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on. And I think at one stage we had 300 live viewers here. So
yes, so we hit a Biden loser unit. That's hard to do with YouTube's algorithms these days.
Yeah, it really is. So we did well. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get past that again. There'll probably be I'll be
well. I can always come aboard again at some point if you want.
Oh, absolutely, mate. You're always welcome. And yeah, I'll be in touch with you. Thanks very much, Dankavel, as they'd say.
Make sure to say peace out.
Oh, peace out. Good on you, Styyx. Take care and have a nice week.
Take care.
Bye, mate. All right, that wraps up the live broadcast. If you're new to the channel and you've enjoyed what you've watched here, please give a like and subscribe. And we'll be back with... I meant to do a video there on Friday night with my mate Andito Banderas, but unfortunately, of an evening time, I'm still wiped after the corona. But do stick around where we will be doing a review of The Drunken Master. So if you like a bit of comedy and you want to get away from the doomy sentiments of the modern world, come over and hang out with us and watch Jackie Chan get pissed up and throw some slaps. But I just want to say thank you for everyone who's from my regulars on the chat and anyone who's a new viewer. You're very welcome. Please subscribe. And yeah, we will be in touch soon. But good luck and God bless. I'll talk to you soon.